In this video, we're going to look at the quartiles. So that will be the lower quartile, the median, and the upper quartile. We'll also like to look at the interquartile range and the semi-interquartile range. So first, I'm going to start with some raw data. So here I have some raw data. What I'd like to do is to arrange this into ascending order. So I'll start with the 1 first, then we have 2, then 3, then we have a 4, we have a 5, a 6, and a 7. Now the first thing we're going to find is the median, and then from the median we'll be able to get the lower quartile and the upper quartile. So first we look at the median, and if you listen to that word median, middle, so that'll be halfway point on the data. So we have an odd number here, we have 1 to 7, which is an odd number of things. 7 is an odd number. And what we'll do, we'll cross out, so 1 here, 7 here, the 2 here, then the 6 here. So you see we're going from left to right, then we have the 3, then the 5. So that means this 4 is in the middle, so we're seeing 3 numbers on the left-hand side and 3 numbers on the right-hand side of this 4. So when we look at the spread of the data, 4 is in the middle, so that's the median. So I'll just shade this 4 here, and I'll say that the median, and the symbol for median is Q2, is equal to 4. And I'll just like to highlight that this 4 is Q2. Now upon identifying what is the median, we can look on the left-hand side of the median to locate the lower quartile, and then the right-hand side of the median to locate what is the upper quartile. So I'll just write over this raw data. So here I have my raw data. I identify the 4 is in the middle, which is Q2, the median. And let's look to the left-hand side now. We'll do the same thing. We want the halfway point on the left-hand side of the median. So when I cross this 1 here, I'll cross this 3 here. And this 2 will be the halfway point on the left-hand side of the median, which is a quarter of the entire spread of the data. So this 2 would be the lower quartile. And the symbol for the lower quartile is Q1. So I'm just going to write Q1 here. And to put that the lower quartile, symbol is Q1, is equal to 2. Now let's look on the right-hand side of the median. We'll do the same thing. We want the halfway point on the right-hand side of the median. So when we cross this 5 here, we cross this 7 here. And this 6 will be the halfway point on the right-hand side of the median, which will be 3/4 of the entire spread of the data. So the 6 would be our upper quartile. And the symbol for our upper quartile would be Q3. So I'll write my upper quartile. Symbol is Q3. Would be equal to 6. Now, once you are able to determine what is the lower quartile and the upper quartile, we could work out something called the interquartile range. So I'll put that my interquartile range is equal to my upper quartile, which is Q3, take away my lower quartile, which is Q1. So instead of writing interquartile range, I can write IQR for interquartile range and put is equal to, and my upper quartile Q3 is equal to 6, and my lower quartile Q1 is equal to 2. So that'll be 6 take away 2. So I write 6 take away 2. So my interquartile range is equal to 4. Now my semi-interquartile range is just the word semi, half, would just be half of the interquartile range. So if I found a half of 4, that will be my semi-interquartile range. So I'll write semi-interquartile range. And the formula for that would be a half of the interquartile range. And the interquartile range was what? Q3 take away Q1. So we'll have a half of, so a half open brackets, Q3 take away Q1. So that will be a half of 6 take away 2, which will just be a half of 4. And we all know a half multiplied by 4 is equal to 2. All right, and if you were to work that on our calculator, we could just put the use the fraction button and say 1 over 2 like this, and just multiply it by 4, and we get 2. Or we could say 1 over 2 like this. Then we open brackets and put the 4, close brackets, and we still get 2. Or instead of using a half, we could use 0.5. So that'll be 0.5 multiplied by 4, and you get your answer 2. So here, when we look at our data, we have 7 things, which is an odd number of things. Let's look at if we had an even number of things. So instead of 7, I'll go with 8. So I'll just come here, I'll put our data in ascending order one time. I'll go from 1 to 8. Now first, we locate the median, which is the halfway point. So I'll cross off the 1 here, then the 8, 2 here, then the 7, 3 here, then the 6. Now if I were to cross the 4 and then the 5, I'll have nothing in the middle. So I'll have to leave the 4 and the 5 in the middle. So I have 3 on this side, and 3 on this side, and the 4 and the 5 in the middle. Now the 4 and the 5 is not the median. We'll have to work out the median from this 4 and 5. So I'll have my median, which is Q2, would be equal to the 4 plus the 5 divided by 2. So we have 4 plus 5 is 9 divided by 2, and that will be 4.5. So that's the halfway point between the 4 and the 5. So now let's look and see what our lower quartile and upper quartile would be. So I'll just write over the data. And I'm going to put this line in the middle of 4 and 5, signifying where the median will be. And I'll just call this line here Q2, which is the 4.5. And now I want to find the halfway point on the left-hand side of the median. So I'll cross this 1 here and this 4 here. And if I were to cross the 2 and the 3, I'll have nothing in the middle. So I'll leave the 2 and the 3. And now the lower quartile, we add in this 2 and 3 and divide them by 2. All right, so let's put this little box around the 2 and the 3. So our lower quartile, which is Q1, will be equal to the 2 plus the 3, and we're going to divide that by 2. So we're going to get 2 plus 3 is 5, divided by 2, which is 2.5. And now for the upper quartile, we're going to do the same thing on the right-hand side. So I'm going to cross the 5 here, then the 8. And of course, if I cross the 6 and 7, I'll have nothing in the middle, so I'll leave the 6 and 7. And I'll just put this little box around the 6 and 7. And now my upper quartile, which is Q3, will be equal to the 6 plus the 7 divided by 2. So 6 plus 7 is 13. So we'll have 13 divided by 2, which is equal to 6.5. So now to work out our interquartile range and semi-interquartile range, so I can simply write IQR is equal to Q3, take away Q1, so IQR is for interquartile range. So that would be 6.5, take away 2.5, and that will be equal to 4. And of course, our semi-interquartile range, and I'll write IQR for semi-interquartile range, is simply a half of the interquartile range. So that's a half of Q3 take away Q1. And what I could do is just find a half of the answer I got for the interquartile range. So that'll be a half of 4, which is equal to 2. Now, what we have gathered from the quartiles is that the median is a half of the spread of the data. The lower quartile is a quarter of the spread of the data. And the upper quartile is 3/4 of the spread of the data. So let's look at how to work out the quartiles from a frequency table using the cumulative frequency curve. So here I have a frequency table with some grouped data. I'll put the link in the description for the video I did when I worked out the cumulative frequency for this table and drew the cumulative frequency curve. And of course, we're going to draw the cumulative frequency curve. So of course, we have to work out the cumulative frequency. First frequency is 0, so I put 0 here. 0 plus 5 is 5. 5 plus 7 is 12, and so on. And when drawing the cumulative frequency curve, you plot cumulative frequency on the y-axis against the marks on the x-axis. And of course, for the marks, because it's group data, we use the upper class limits. And this would be the cumulative frequency curve for the information in this table here. Now, let's use this curve to work out what is the median, the lower quartile, and the upper quartile. Now notice my last frequency for the cumulative frequency is 100. So that means sigma f is equal to 100. And sigma f being equal to 100 implies that n is equal to 100. So remember that whatever you get for sigma f, when you add up all your frequencies, that would be n. So I'll just go to the next page. So I'll put that my median, which is Q2, is equal to half the nth term. And remember, n was 100. So a half of the 100th term, which would be the 50th term. Because we all know a half of 100 is 50. So I'm going to come to my cumulative frequency curve. I'm going to look at the axis for the cumulative frequency, which is the y-axis. I'm going to locate 50 because my median is my 50th term. I'm going to draw a straight line across from 50 to touch the curve. And where that line touches the curve, I'm going to bring a straight line down. And that would be my Q2. Now if we look at the scale here on the x-axis, we have 2 centimeters representing 10 units. So we have 10 little blocks to reach 10. So each little block is going to be 1 mark. So if we are counting here, we have 45 here, and we're going to have 46, 47. So Q2 is equal to 47. So I'm going to put the 50th term is equal to 47 marks. And we're going to do the same thing for the lower and upper quartile. So my lower quartile, symbol is Q1, will be equal to a quarter of the nth term, and that will be equal to a quarter of 100 because n is 100, so a quarter of the 100th term, and a quarter of 100 is equal to 25, so the 25th term. Now let's look and see what the 25th term is equal to. So we're going to come here on our cumulative frequency, locate 25, so that's in the middle of 20 and 30. And we're going to draw a line straight across from 25 to touch the curve. And where that line touches the curve, we bring a line straight down. And that will be Q1. So looking at this line here is 30. This here will be 35. So this is 1 less than 35. So that'll be 34. So Q1 is 34. So Q1 is 34 marks. And now let's look at the upper quartile. So my upper quartile, which is Q3, is equal to 3/4 of the nth term. So that'll be 3/4 of 100. And we all know 3/4 of 100 would be 75. So the 75th term. So we're going to come to our cumulative frequency, locate 75. And we're going to draw a line straight across to touch the curve. And where that line touches the curve, we bring a line straight down. And this will be Q3. So let's count. This is 60 here. So here's 65. So then we have 66, 67, 68. So Q3 is equal to 68 marks. And of course, we could work out the interquartile range and the semi-interquartile range once we have our values for Q3 and Q1. So now, when we found the quartiles using the cumulative frequency curve, it's an estimate of the quartiles. So you'll notice in a question, they'll say, use the graph to estimate the median, or use the graph to estimate the lower quartile, or use the graph to estimate the interquartile range or semi-interquartile range, stuff like that. So essentially what you're doing here is estimating the quartiles. So I'd just like to put here was 3/4 of n. This here was a half of n. And this line here was a quarter of n. And remember, n is the total number of things that you have, which is equal to sigma f, which is adding up all your frequencies. And that will bring us to the end of this video.